Over the year, I mentioned way back in January that we're going to do a series this year that was about manifesting mastery, only going deep within it. Because at Unity, we have this crazy thought, this crazy idea that thoughts are things, that thoughts create our reality. And when you wrap your mind around that, then all of a sudden you go, well, what could I do with that? And we started the conversation. We started the conversation about the idea or the thought that you can either do this consciously and create the reality that you want, or you can sit back and you can be a victim and you can pretend that life is happening to you versus happening through you. And so we started talking about that. And honestly, my observation has been that at this point in time, if you decide to take on that challenge, then you are officially anointed. You're officially anointed. You become what's referred to as a metaphysician. Metaphysics means beyond the ordinary, beyond what is seen. We're getting down to the root cause of what's causing things to happen. That's what metaphysics is. And so this is a big part of the Unity teachings. And for some of us, me included, I really get into it, like a lot. You are looking at a result of my practice in metaphysics. Ta-da! Thank you. This was always a dream of mine. I remember having it when I was 18 or 19 years old. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he said, "What do you think you'd really like to do?" And all of a sudden, I had this vision came to my mind, and my vision was speaking in front of people and sharing this message of hope and compassion and love. Now, some people that come into Unity don't really do a deep dive into metaphysics, and if you don't, it's okay. Like, there's no judgment there, but just so you know, it's there, and it's a huge part of the teachings of Unity. So in part one, we discussed this idea of the tools. What's in the toolbox? What are the things that we can use to manifest our own reality? And one of the Unity principles we talked about was we're co-creators with God, creating our reality through our thoughts held in mind. Right? Anybody hear that one before? Please tell me you have. If not, I should be fired. Right? So anyways, yes, this is true. And we started talking about in the first section of the conversation this formula, if you will, where we talked about substance plus directive power plus using spiritual tools is what creates your reality if you're going to do it consciously, right? And so we talked about substance. We talked about substance being spiritual Play-Doh, which means it's there, it's all around us. It's waiting for us to direct it. It's up to us to use it. And it is 100% neutral, which means it doesn't care. It's going to do and go wherever you direct it. And then we talked about directive power. So in other words, we've got the stuff that's out there. Again, it's spiritual Play-Doh, but guess what? Just like a can of Play-Doh, you got to pull it out and use it and make it whatever you want to make it. That's how you do it. Well, how does that work? Well, if you think about Play-Doh, the little children and sometimes the adults pull the Play-Doh out and they make whatever they want, right? But in Unity, in this process of metaphysics, we have these things, and it's called our thoughts, our words, and our actions. That's the things that we use to, in other words, bring forth whatever it is that we're trying to create, right? We talked about that. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. How many law of attraction people do I have here? Yeah, there's a few of us. And there's a bunch of different ways to use it. But Unity, we really primarily focus on using these spiritual tools, these affirmations, denials, visualizations, gratitude, and then we also use something called the 12 powers. And that's how we do it. And again, we talked about this in the last series at the beginning of the year, which is recorded, and if you want to go see it, you can see it, in case you haven't heard this before. So we primarily have these different tools. We have a formula of doing it. So as a result of using those things, then what happens is, if we're doing it correctly, you have what's referred to as a demonstration. So in other words, we take our time, we focus, we use this stuff, and then all of a sudden, whoosh, this appears. Cool, right? That's how it works. So that was the first part of the conversation we had. Then we went and started talking about this idea. In the second quarter, we talked about creating a blueprint, right? And I want you to think about a blueprint for a minute. What is a blueprint? A blueprint is the plan. It's like the map. How are we going to do this? What is this thing going to look like? And how am I going to do it? And we went back to Myrtle, who started this whole movement, and we used their thing that said, I'm a child of God, therefore I don't inherit sickness. And what we did is we broke that down and we said, Myrtle, in a sense, gave us the blueprint that if we want to use, we can use it. You don't have to use Myrtle's blueprint, by the way. You can have your own blueprint. It doesn't matter. But if we were going to follow Myrtle's blueprint, it sounded something like this. She made a decision to quit being a victim. Why? Because she spent her whole life saying that she had a frail body, she couldn't do anything about it, and she was going to just be sick her entire life. That's what she was telling herself. She accepted who she truly was. So in other words, she finally got it through her head that she actually was a child of God, right? She believed that everything that she needed was inside of her. In other words, it didn't need to come from anywhere else. It was inside of her. Why? Because she's connected to the divine, and if you're connected to the divine, you don't need anything else. She believes she could change. Do you think that might be a good thing to think? Because there's people out there that believe that they can't change. There are people that believe that, unfortunately. She quit believing the lies that she'd been telling herself, because she'd been telling herself her whole life, I'm sick, there's nothing I can do about it. And then she understood her beliefs were creating her reality, and she began to change them. So in a sense, Myrtle became a metaphysician. People at Unity, when you really start to do a deep dive into this work, that's what you do. You start looking inside of yourself and saying, hold on, my thoughts create my reality. Maybe I should start paying attention to what I'm thinking. Might not be a bad idea, right? Oh, yeah. So that's where the work is, right? So for those of you that decided to join me on this journey, what I said at the end of that talk last time was that why don't you take a minute and figure out what your blueprint is? It would be really, really helpful to do that. Now, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to have you raise your hand if you did that or not, but it's not that I don't think you should seriously consider it. But you might want to seriously consider it if you want to dive into this work and start doing the deeper work, the metaphysical work that's a part of this beautiful thing that we call unity. Okay, so then what we're going to be talking about today is overcoming the blocks to manifestation. And I want to go back to this formula where we've got the substance plus directive power plus the spiritual tools equals the demonstration. Sounds pretty simple, right? So then obviously, once you start using these tools, every single time that you want something, it's going to show up, right? Of course. The truth of the matter is, especially when you first start, maybe not. Maybe not. I know if I were to ask each and every one of you, have you applied the principles and did everything that you want always show up? You would all say, no, it did not. And then the question is, well, why not? Why didn't it show up? I did everything they said to do. Why isn't this thing showing up? And that is a really, really, really good question. And that's what I want to spend this week and next week talking about, right? So in the Heartfelt Centered Metaphysics book, what it says is demonstration is proving the truth principle in one's body or affairs. So again, we're coming down to demonstration. Because if we're applying all the stuff, we're doing all these things, there should be a demonstration, right? And then it doesn't always happen. But what we said is then, okay, well, great. Then what about when there's a problem? And the thing that I mentioned, I talk about the story when I was 19 years old and I was on fire with this stuff and I made a decision that I wanted to be a millionaire. And it didn't happen. And we talked about that a little bit. But as I go deeper into understanding why didn't that happen, there's some pretty interesting things that I've discovered that I'd like to share. So in the book, it says, you may rest in the assurance that the principles that you mentally perceive as true of God are inviolate. That means those lessons, those truths are untouched, they're pure. There is nothing wrong with truth principles, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And if there seems to be an error in their outworking, it's because some misapplication on the part of the demonstrator. In other words, it's here. It's here where the problem is. So again, I just wanted to highlight it. It's the misapplication on the part of the demonstrator. It's like, all right, okay, I got it. Let me go further. So in other words, it's not God. The problem isn't God. No, there's no problem with God. It's not the truth principles. No, there's no problem with the truth principles. It's me. So something is off. And when I say that, and this is critically important that you hear it, when I say that, there is none, zero blame, shame, judgment, or guilt. None. It's just you're trying to figure this thing out. This is a process of manifesting. You are an incredibly powerful being. But the problem is when we were born, we weren't handed the manual on, well, how do you do this? We weren't taught that. And so then all of a sudden you start coming to a crazy place called Unity, and you're like, no, I think I'd like to start doing this. And I just want you to imagine it's like any other skill set. It's like riding a bike or playing a piano or whatever. When you first get started, it probably isn't going to sound or look very pretty. In other words, it's going to take a minute for you to actually remember how to do this. So it takes a little bit of time and practice in order for this to happen. So it's not like when you look at this stuff and you go, why isn't this happening? There's nothing wrong with you. My own experience is, what did I start doing when I started practicing this stuff? Why can't I figure it out? Why can't I do it? Am I stupid? Why doesn't it happen? Why can't I just blah, 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 blah. Anybody been there? Yeah, I think we all have. So we look at it and say, okay, well, then what's really going on here? So I just said that the misapplication really is a misalignment. It's a misalignment. Again, we're talking about our thoughts, our words, our action. Could there be some thoughts? Could there be some words? Could there be some actions that are out of alignment with what it is that I'm trying to create? And my experience has taught me that without a shadow of a doubt, that is pretty much always the case. There's one of those three things that are out of whack. And often it comes down to one item. Stumbling blocks and obstacles that seem to be in the outer are primarily in the mind as thoughts and feelings. So if I were to condense that, it would sound like this. Stumbling blocks, thoughts and our feelings. Our thoughts and our feelings. Really? Maybe you want to take a look at that, right? So there's a story about Jesus in the Bible in the book of Matthew, and it's where right after Jesus fed the 5,000, what happened was the disciples needed to get back to camp where they were all staying, and what happened was they all jumped in a boat and they head off. Jesus stuck around doing, Jesus things, right? And so they're in this boat, they're hanging out, and all of a sudden the winds pick up, a storm starts to pick up. And all of a sudden they're hanging out and they think they see Jesus walking across the water. And so Peter calls out, hey, Jesus, is that you? And Jesus says, take heart. Yeah, it's me. Don't be afraid, right? So then what happens? So Peter looks at him and says, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come unto thee on the water. And Jesus said, come. So I'm reading this, I'm kind of laughing, because I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, Peter, you think you're all that in a bag of chips. I can see Peter going, yeah, come on, challenge me. Let me see if I can walk across the water like you're doing, right? And Peter's like, bring it. Let's see what you got, right? And so what happens? Peter gets out there and he gets out of the boat and Peter starts to walk across the water to go to Jesus, right? But when all of a sudden he looks around and he sees the wind, and he sees the waves, and he sees everything that's going on, guess what happens? Panic sets in. Panic sets in. And he begins to sink. And he cries, Lord, save me, right? And Jesus looks down, grabs his arm, says, come on, get out of there. And he makes a little comment, and he says, O ye of little faith, wherefore does thou doubt? Why are you doubting? Why? Why are you doubting, right? So, That's the story in the Bible. Of course, metaphysicians are going to do a metaphysical interpretation of the story. So rewind for a minute. So just understand something, first of all, that every single one of us, all of us, have had our moment where we tried to step out of the boat. We all did. We had an idea, we had a thought, we had something that we thought was inspired directly from the divine, and we said, hey, let's go do this thing, right? And we dared to dream of something more, maybe something you wanted to do that was really, really aligned with your truth. And so you do what? You start going, hey, this is what I'm going to do. We've all taken that very first step, right? And for one moment, it worked. We thought we were okay. Everything was going to be fine. Everything was going to be good. And we were walking on the water, in a sense. That's what we were doing metaphysically. But then, guess what happened? We started looking around. And what did we start to see? We noticed the waves or the circumstances that were happening around us. And we're like, ruh-roh. Or we saw the wind. We felt the wind of doubt come in. Uh-oh. And the choppy seas of, well, what if? What if I try and do this and it doesn't work out? What if I don't make it? What if I don't fail? What if I fail? What if? Right? And just like Peter, we started to sink. Right? And the story illustrates what happens when our spiritual intentions basically are high. We're like, yes, I can do this. And everything's in motion. We're moving forward. We're doing this thing. And then life throws us a storm. It's exactly what happens. And really, this story has nothing to do with Jesus defying gravity, right? It's not. It's about you and I navigating, if you will, this invisible tension that happens between our faith and fear. That's what it's about. So in other words, there's a struggle. Am I going to believe? Or am I going to go into fear? Well, which one am I picking? And you have a choice. You do. And that's what happened. Peter in the story represents the seeker, the spiritual seeker. So in other words, he's out there, he's trying to figure it out, he's going forward. Yes. And it's like you and me when we're committed to living a higher truth. We're Peter, in a sense. We can be. And when Peter says, Lord, bid me come, what he's saying is, I'm willing to act on this inspiration, this divine inspiration. I'm willing to do that. That's what I'm willing to do. I trust the call I feel inside. I'm ready to step out, right? And Jesus says one simple word, come. Let's do this. There's no long lecture. He's not sitting there saying, well, Peter, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And you might want to talk to a tax accountant and No, come. Just come, right? Because once the vision is given, I'm coming, then what happened is the path is really activated by faith. That's what happens, is we step out on faith and we trust the vision. We trust what we've been given. That's what we do, not by having it all figured out. The mistake some people make is they think, well, I know, but I need to have a really good plan and I got to make sure that all this is here and this is here and this is here and this is here and this is here. And 5 years later, guess what they're still doing? But I just don't have it figured out how I'm going to do it yet. So I got to make sure that the plan is in place and I've got everything figured out before you take that first step. I coach hundreds of people. Do you know how many people I've seen this happen to? A lot. Because they don't have it figured out. They think they need to have all the pieces in place. And so they sit there week after week, month after month, year after year. And they do nothing because they don't have it figured out. So Peter steps out and he walks on the water, right? This is the most beautiful moment when your mind, your heart, and your soul are aligned and you're like, yes. When you're vibrating at a really high level of your desire, when your desire is the thing that you're focused on and you're not worried about everything else, when your beliefs support your intentions, right? But then what happened? The wind, the storm, all the uncertainty, right? The storm represents mental turbulence. I love that. The storm represents mental turbulence, fear, doubt, anxiety. that arises when the ego feels unsafe and uncertain. Just notice, is it his divinity that's freaking out? Or is it his ego? His divinity or Christ in the story is saying what? Come here. And yet the ego gets involved, and then guess what happens? There we go. So he takes his attention off the vision and he puts it on the condition. Vision, where do I want to go? Condition, everything else. And the majority of his time is now spent on what? Drowning. Spent on drowning. That's what he does, right? And the result, he was afraid, and he started to begin to sink. That's what happened. So in the metaphysical journey, what happens is the sinking, not because the vision wasn't true, not because you weren't given an idea or a thought that you should be doing, but because we gave more attention to what we feared versus what we desire. And as a result, you start to sink, right? This is how manifestation gets derailed. This is how this happens. Not because the tools don't work. The tools work just fine. They really, really do. But because our attention becomes divided. As the saying goes in Unity, where our attention goes, finish the sentence, folks. Energy flows. Somebody said it. Thank you. Yes. So Peter cries out, Lord, save me. And what happens? Does Jesus sit there and wait for very long? He doesn't. What does he do? Immediately, Jesus, the indwelling Christ, Jesus stretches out his hand and catches him. Immediately. There's no delay. There's no, well, hold on, I got to talk to you and give you the lesson and tell you everything that you just screwed up. No. He just reached out and said, come here, I got you. We're good, right? Understand, Jesus represents the indwelling Christ within us. And that presence within us is always, it always responds when we turn back toward it. But when we're caught up in fear, are you thinking about doing that normally? I don't know about you, but probably not very often. Yeah, fear takes over and it's like, there we go, here we are. And this is the grace of spiritual law in my own process and own understanding, that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be willing to return to it. And is it going to sit there and give you a lecture? Is it going to ask you, why haven't you done this before? Is it going to sit there and go, how dare you? You haven't talked to me in 10 or 15 years. It's just not the way it works, folks. It's not. It's grace. That's one of the beautiful things about spiritual laws when you really start to study it, is the grace that's involved. And we get to return to the vision. We get to return to the presence. We get to return to the vibration of faith. And that's like, oh, I get it. So I guess the question would be then, all right, so where are you right now in the story? Work in progress? I think that's fair. I can relate to that. But have you stepped out of the boat with the dream, maybe? Have you sank and are still not coming up? Do you have this idea that's been burning in your heart? Oh, I'd really love to do this. I'd really love to do that. And yet there's something that's just holding you back because maybe the circumstances just aren't right. Where are you in this process? And if you've begun to sink, if your mind is choppy and those waves seem awfully real, don't condemn yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Remember, there's no shame, there's no blame, there's no guilt, there's no judgment. We just don't do that here. Those are just outdated tools of transformation. We don't need them anymore. How about just be compassionate? How about offer yourself some grace or some forgiveness? How about giving yourself permission that up until this moment, it's absolutely perfect where you are. There was reasons maybe why you didn't do it, but maybe now things could be different. And maybe you can start to take that first step out of the boat. Wouldn't that be cool? I know a lot of you come up to me with different ideas, and a lot of you are doing those ideas. Some aren't, but some are. And so for those of you that are, cool. For those of you that aren't, I love you. I'm just going to kind of pat you on the butt and say, come on, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Right? Do what Peter did. What did he do? He cried out, help. And then he got refocused. He reached out and he returned. That's all he did. It wasn't super complicated. It was fairly quick. And as a result, what happened? Then the indwelling Christ, the Spirit within you goes, I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere, regardless of what looks like is going on out there, with the ultimate message, which is ultimately that you had it all along. I've always been here. I've always been waiting for you just to return. I am here always. I am here in all ways. That's what the message is. And so my hope is that maybe in this story, there's been some things that have possibly reminded you of some roadblocks that you've had in your own process, because we've had them in our process. Some of you are facing those roadblocks now, and it's okay. But don't let that define you in any way, shape, or form. The biggest thing that I would say, the biggest lesson that I needed to learn was I didn't fail at anything. It was just me trying to figure it out. And so sometimes it takes a couple of cracks at it to kind of figure it out. And in the meantime, it is what it is. But the worst thing that you can do is sit there and judge yourself. Why can't you figure this out? Why can't you get it right? When are you going to get your you-know-what together? All of those things, right? And if we could just stop that. So, for those of you that may be struggling a little bit this morning, I thought I would put together a little affirmative prayer I want to share with you, and I'm going to put it up here so you can take a picture on it, and if somebody wants a copy of this, I can also make a copy of it. But I thought what we might be able to do, if it's not too small, is try to say it together. So again, if you can't read it, it's okay. I'm just going to read it together for those of you that want to try to read it. We'll say it together. There is one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God, the good, omnipotent. In this moment, I remember that even in the storm, the presence of God is here. Beneath every wave, within every gust of wind, behind every uncertainty, divine love holds me steady. I may not see the calm yet, but I know it's already unfolding. I may not understand the way through, but the wisdom of Spirit is guiding each step that I take. I may feel shaken, but the truth of my being cannot be moved. I affirm now that peace is greater than panic. I affirm now that love is greater than loss. I affirm now that God is greater than any appearance before me. Right now, I am anchored in unshakable truth. The Christ within me is my peace, my power, my protection. I walk through this moment not alone, but upheld by invisible strength, by divine light, and by everlasting grace. Amen. Amen. So, there are other things that can block us, but I think what we talked about today, in a sense, could touch every single other thing that can possibly block us. But what I'm going to do next week is I'm actually going to talk specifically about the other things that can block us from our manifestations. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Other than that, I just, again, getting up here always touches my heart, and I'm incredibly grateful for each and every one of you. I just want you to know what a brilliant light of God that you are. I want you to know how needed you are. I want you to know how incredibly valuable you are to not only this community, but the world right now. I want you to know that you are the divine incarnate, and that's not a little thing. That's pretty cool. And we get the blessings of you being here, just like you are, which is the greatest gift of all, just your being. So having said that, I just want to say thank you. I love you. I love you. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for all that you are. Thank you for all that you bring. It is an incredible gift what you are doing. God bless, namaste, and namaste. Thank you. In our love offering blessing, we take our blessings in our hands. We know that some of you give online and all the other things. So however you give, first of all, we just really want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Your gifts help us do what it is that we do here and let us get out into the community and do all the things that we do. So for that, thank you, thank you, thank you. We take our love offering in our hand, and together we say, Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive.
Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face on you and give you peace.
So we just take a moment and just say thank you, thank you, thank you, God, for these gifts. May they go out into the world and do the work that is meant to be done. We are grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen.